Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 27th of October. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather situation. You can do that lots of different ways by listening to your NOAA weather radio, logging on to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line's open at 800-472-0391. You can find us during the day on social media as well, on Twitter, on Facebook under NWS Alaska. And if you haven't listened to the afternoon broadcast on YouTube, you can certainly check out kind of a quick overview of what's going on all around the state from NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks on the YouTube channels there. You can simply find more information after this show on AKwx TV. That channel brought to you by our broadcast partner here at alaskapublic.org. It's also on their page. When you go there after the show, you'll see the complete broadcast. It's the whole 30 minutes. If you like a shorter snippet, check out those afternoon briefings that are available each day around 4 o'clock. Here's the hazardous weather situation at this point. We have winter storm warnings going until 4 o'clock in the morning for the lower and upper Noatak and Kobuk Valley areas. Now, the lower Noatak and Kobuk regions are going to get a lot more snow than the upper areas there. In fact, we're talking about 4 to 7 inches in the upper areas with as much as 8 to 14 inches. I'm sorry, 5 to 9 inches in the upper areas and 8 to 14 in the lower region. So some places storm total now, so that's from the time it's already started till the time it finally stops. You're talking about the potential of up to or even more than a foot of new snow with this winter storm warning. So probably things are going to get a little more tricky to get around, at least in the near term there. So looking for most of the snow to start to diminish very late tonight and into tomorrow morning, and then you'll be dealing with snow showers at least through the remainder of the daytime tomorrow. So the heaviest of snow probably occurring right now and through the early morning hours before it starts to taper off. For the upper Kuskokwim Valley, including areas around McGrath and the lower Yukon region, you're talking about probably 4 to 7 inches of snow in that area. That advisory will also continue through the evening hours until tomorrow morning. So a winter weather advisory for your area for 4 to 7 inches of snow. That is a storm total as well. Here's a look at the weather situation. We have one area of low pressure that's working through the Aleutians right now. You can see that spiraling its way toward Bristol Bay, bringing some stronger winds there. A lot of cold air dropping southward with that should help to energize the storm a little bit more. So as you get into the marine forecast here with me in just a few minutes, you'll see those storm force winds here affecting the Pribilofs and the eastern chain and probably approaching the Alaska Peninsula with some stronger gusts. Behind that is another wave of low pressure that's working its way eastward, and that's going to crank up the winds and push a front into the central and western Bering here by midweek. So we're going to keep an eye on this next storm as well, but we're currently focused on the cold air dropping southward that is kind of boosting the storm now across the eastern Bering and the Aleutians in southwestern Alaska. Here's a look at the bigger picture across our entire state. So here's our parent low up around the eastern sections of Siberia. You can see it sitting right over the Gulf of Anadyr. Still got most of western Alaska and a pretty healthy south and westerly flow. Plenty of dry air out over the Gulf and really across a large part of the interior as well. The snow is still falling across the Kobuk and Noatak valleys because of that persistent upslope flow that's working right into the western and south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. And we also have that other area of low pressure north and west of Sand Point that'll continue working its way north and east along that boundary. Now, as this moves east, a lot of the air is going to run into, or a lot of the storm is going to work into some drier air. So precipitation is not as much of a factor across eastern parts of Alaska as it is across the west right now. In fact, we'll be dealing with periods of rain and snow tonight across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound up toward Nome, where it's going to continue to snow with a couple inches there at least. And south and east, you're looking at a weaker system that is still working its way northward. You can see it's pushing some precipitation across Haida Gwaii, the low south and west there. Here's the other wave of low pressure. This one across and west of Bristol Bay, working some snow northward tonight. Expect more of that snow to fall across the Seward Peninsula. The other circulation much stronger south and east of the Gulf of Anadyr. And then we have the beginning of our next system beginning to show up out in the west. As we get into tonight, the focus for precipitation is really going to be along the west coast, the heaviest of which will be right here across the Noatak and Kobuk valleys. Once again, some of those places could be looking at storm totals over 1 foot of snow. Looks like rain and snow will be possible around parts of Norton Sound, especially along the coast and not over the sound itself. The Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, especially the lower areas, will be going back and forth between rain and snow. And then this 993 millibar low should work its way into the North Pacific, just south and west of Castle Cape and Kodiak Island, with the 987 millibar low starting to drop in intensity. So we expect the winds to come up here a little more. Stronger gusts will be in the area through southeast, and periods of rain, of course, will be expected with snow at higher elevations. Out across the west, we've got a ridge of high pressure working its way across the Bering. That's slowing down the progression of that next storm, but it does start to return into the weather picture as we get into Tuesday, with warmer air working northward a little bit more. The system across the western Gulf really isn't working eastward very quickly, but it will likely spread some rain across parts of Kodiak. A trough of low pressure, really not finding much of a difference in temperature anymore across the west coast, but it's still a mechanism for starting snowfall across the west. And snow will be winding down across the Noatak and Kobuk Valley. So if you're in those areas, look for improving weather tomorrow, but continued chances for at least snow showers and probably still some light snow at least through the morning. Now, rain and snow will continue across the Alaska Peninsula and parts of some of the higher terrain in the southern sections of the Alaska Range itself. Look for snow across some parts of the Kuskokwim Valley and out across the western coast, all the way out toward the Pribilofs. Some of the strongest winds will be tomorrow across the Pribilofs, with storm force winds there, sustained winds that is, and stronger gusts still possible. Lower pressure just west of Haida Gwaii is working northward, and the combination of both of those systems will keep rain moving in across the east and northern Gulf Coast as we head through Wednesday. A low pressure and a trough extends all the way through the interior. Most areas, again, are still going to be dry through midweek. That includes Fairbanks. You'll see more clouds than anything else. South Central most likely will remain dry, except for maybe some passing snow showers on the hilltops. And periods of rain and snow may pass through Prince William Sound. The higher up in terrain you go, the better chance you'll see of a rain-snow mix or all snow, but most coastal areas will be dealing with rain at this point. A new area of cold air is dropping southward toward the Chukchi Seacoast. That will likely spawn some snow showers as we get into the midweek. A better chance for some light snow around Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, out toward Kaktovik. And our frontal boundary in the west is working its way eastward, still trying to battle high pressure working across the eastern Bering Sea coast, and that is continuing that northerly flow down the west coast there. Parts of Kotzebue Sound, including Kotzebue itself, may still be looking at snow showers midweek. And rain and snow will be passing through the central and eastern chain. A better chance for a rain-snow mix around the Pribilofs by midweek. But behind that, the wind should begin to settle down with a brief time of clearing for places like Kiska and Attu as we get into Wednesday. Here's a look at temperatures today. Obviously, the interior is cooling down. More on that one in just a minute. Mid-40s to about 50 degrees, all we could muster up across southeastern Alaska, with Sitka one of the warmer spots there. 30s and 40s around Prince William Sound, 45 for Middleton Island, 33 in Kenai, 30 today in Anchorage with Skwentna and Talkeetna in the upper 20s and lower 30s through the day. Denali made it up to around 33 degrees, but Denali Park this morning was 9 below, so certainly a lot of cold air dropping into the valley there. Around 18 degrees around Fairbanks, 20 up in Eagle, 21 in Tanana, 10 degrees at Fort Yukon. You can see temperatures were a little bit milder the higher up you climbed, with lower 20s around Anaktuvik Pass, 19 for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, 22 in Kaktovik, only 21 in Barrow, with areas along the Chukchi Seacoast ranging in the mid to upper 20s for the most part. 30 in Kivalina with Kotzebue at 27, Shishmaref at 30, 34 in Nome, Tin City in the western part of the Seward Peninsula in the mid-30s today, with Norton Sound in the mid to upper 30s. Look like most of the middle and upper Yukon Valley saw temps in the lower to mid-20s there, with places like Galena and Ruby a little bit milder. Around 25 there in McGrath today, 37 in Bethel, and around Bristol Bay, we saw temps in the upper 30s and lower 40s, a little bit milder in King Salmon today at 42. Kodiak Island was in the lower 40s, mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula, 40 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. Temperatures not quite to 40 degrees in the Pribilofs, and lower 40s for the central and western chain. Now, overnight low temperatures, of course, will be coldest where the air is drier and more clear. You can see that from Fairbanks and points east. Temperatures actually go sub-zero there for Fort Yukon and around Northway, about 1 below. South Central is looking at teens and 20s, with coastal areas still hovering close to freezing Around southeast, look for temperatures to remain above freezing, with coastal regions likely in the upper 30s to lower 40s, including Ketchikan and Annette. The Alaska Peninsula will stay in the upper 30s tonight, as will most of the Aleutians. Shemya around 43, though. 30 in Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence, and Savunga, about 32. The Seward Peninsula, including Nome, in the upper 20s. And once again, the interior, probably going sub-zero east of Fairbanks and the highways. Back to the west, look for temps in the lower to mid-20s. Some areas approaching 30 near the coast and the Arctic coast. Teens and 20s for you. High temperatures tomorrow should make it back into the mid-20s. South and west, probably looking at readings in the lower to mid-30s. In fact, closer to 40 around Bristol Bay. Nome and the Seward Peninsula in the upper 20s and lower 30s. The Alaska Peninsula and the Chain in the upper 30s and lower 40s for most areas. South Central probably back in the mid to upper 30s, with coastal areas a little bit closer to 40. Kodiak Island a milder 45, and southeast mid to upper 40s. In fact, some coastal areas like Sitka, Craig and Klawock, even Ketchikan and Annette may be pushing that 50-degree mark again tomorrow. Flying weather now shows IFR conditions north of Barrow and right over Barrow, with the winds changing direction there. Expect poor visibility at times. And around the southwest coast and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, we do expect IFR throughout the day. A wide area of VFR through most of the Alaska and the mainland. Kenai Peninsula looking pretty good. South of that, though, along that low pressure system, expect MVFR. And generally, southern parts of southeast will be dealing with MVFR, with IFR conditions across Kiska and points west along the new frontal boundary that's taking shape. Past conditions then look like this. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass we expect to be VFR through your Tuesday. Getting ahead of myself. It would be nice if it was Wednesday already. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass heading toward VFR after starting out with marginal conditions in the morning. Rainy Pass we expect to see VFR. Windy Pass, visual flight rules expected, and still looking good for Isabel Pass as well. Mentasta Pass should be all clear. Tanita Pass VFR conditions are expected for your Tuesday, and Portage Pass we expect to be VFR, with Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to be VFR by the afternoon. Freezing levels show a little bit of a kink in the system out here across the Bering Strait, with warmer air lifting northward. One reason we're watching for a rain-snow mix very close to the coastline. Beyond that, though, we see a considerably warmer air much further south. So most of the Bering really not going to have many issues with any overrunning. A little bit of an overrunning issue perhaps across northern parts of southeast, but for right now that warm air is confined to that low pressure system, generally just west of Haida Gwaii. So icing potential we see from the Noatak and Kobuk valleys southward through the Seward Peninsula and along the Yukon-Kuskokwim coastline and along the Alaska Peninsula. Most of that's going to be above 2,000 feet. Out west above 7,000 feet before you get into any light to isolated moderate, and generally east of southeastern Alaska below 5,000 feet for icing potential there. The jet stream has a pretty decent area of low pressure just south of the Alaska Peninsula, and this is allowing a great deal of cold to wrap into those surface storms, kind of energizing them a little bit more than what we were talking about yesterday. High pressure across British Columbia and into the interior is allowing that south and easterly flow to work its way up the west coast. Wind speeds still staying strong around 55 knots near Barrow, and much stronger with that next system over the Kamchatka Peninsula, with winds there at 125 knots. At 9,000 feet, low pressure sitting very close to Kodiak Island, giving us a very dry flow across the interior. High pressures across the Yukon and British Columbia and the western provinces. That's mirrored by another wave of high pressure across the North Pacific. But the net effect is that low pressure is dragging in that colder air again. Also across the Bering, between 15 and as high as 60 knots over parts of Adak and Atka. At 3,000 feet, we still see those stronger winds crossing over St. Matthew. Low pressure just south of the Alaska Peninsula there, bringing in some stronger winds, probably channeling that wind through some of the gap areas below, so watch for that. Easterlies moving across the lower and middle Yukon Valley, all the way out toward the Seward Peninsula, with winds there around 30 knots and a trough scene approaching the Chukchi seacoast around 10 to 20 knots. Low pressure just outside of the Dixon entrance is keeping winds moving from east to west across northern parts of southeastern Alaska, and we get a broad westerly flow south of that. It's feeding into the Pacific Northwest. So what about turbulence? Well, we have a few areas along the Aleutians that should be kind of the usual suspects with a winter weather system near the Bering. Below 6,000 feet all the way from the Pribilofs to Dutch Harbor and Alaska and Nikolsky, and probably into places like Cold Bay and False Pass, and eastward into maybe as far east as Pilot Point and Port Hayden. Looks like we're going to have a better chance for occasional moderate right over the land areas there where the winds are shifting, and the speed should be fairly significant throughout a good chunk of the day, again with storm force winds expected tonight and tomorrow in this area. Looks like the eastern Alaska range generally below 6,000 feet, and around the Dixon entrance to maybe Craig and Klawock and perhaps Ketchikan or Annette. Below 6,000 feet, we're going to watch some turbulence, mainly due to a directional shear as low pressure is working its way northward. The wind speeds don't look too horrible at this point, but keep an eye on that if you're heading out tomorrow. That's a look at your aviation forecast. And in just a few minutes, we'll recap your surface weather, of course, and take a look at the marine weather, especially over the southern Bering and the Aleutian chain. Stay with us, more in a minute.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest this evening has been on the program before. He's a recently retired naval aviator and also recently chief of staff at the Naval Research Lab. He's been involved with Department of Defense acquisitions, and he was here as part of the 7th Annual Alaska UAS Interest Group Conference. He's been involved with unmanned aircraft systems for a number of years, and it's been my pleasure to know him. JC, welcome back.
Harry, it's so nice to be back and be back here in Alaska and here with the UAS Users Group.
Talk a little about the company you work for, Cherokee Nation.
Yeah, so the Cherokee Nation is a Native American company. It's an 8A company. Our specialties are IT, data management, and it seemed like a logical next step to, since there's so much data being acquired by unmanned systems, to get into the unmanned systems realm, and that's what we're doing. And we've had a lot of luck working with NOAA. We've worked with the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. We manage a test site out in Oklahoma, and we're just doing a great job. Everything from collecting the data to managing it, and then also the cyber, protecting the network, the C2 net that controls the command and control network for these unmanned systems.
So probably most of our audience knows what NOAA is, but would you explain the acronym?
Yeah, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
And what's the mission, and how does UAS factor in?
Yeah, so NOAA, you might know them, the National Weather Service is part of the National Marine Fisheries Service, the National Ocean Service. So they have a lot of interest in introducing unmanned systems into the organization. We believe that unmanned systems will revolutionize our observation strategy, much like radar has in the past, much like GPS has in the past. So this is a technology that we're all going to really use, and where we're going to use it is in the Arctic, in marine and marine mammal monitoring, and also with hazardous weather. So the dull missions, the denied missions, the places that are tough to get to, like up here in the Arctic, the dangerous missions flying around here in the Arctic, and we're having great luck with it already.
You know, I think I heard it in what you just said, but would you reiterate what I think is a three-part vision that NOAA has?
Yep. The vision is to take care of those things, marine and marine mammal monitoring, hazardous weather, and do observations in the Arctic. And we're lucky that Alaska has them all. And I call Alaska our aircraft carrier in the Arctic. I love coming up here and doing operations because the second I take off, I'm on station, and we can really get a lot of good done in this place.
So what's in it for the average Alaskan? How are UAS or drones how are they going to make our life better, make aviation better, or jobs? How's it going to affect us?
Yeah, so we're going to gather environmental intelligence, and we're going to use that intelligence to help our people here better protect themselves. We have invading weather coming down from the north, and that is going to bring tough high winds, snow. It's going to bring ice packs, and we're going to help to better predict what areas are going to get hit by this weather and by the ice, and set up evacuation strategies and things like that, and make aviation safety flying safer by giving you better forecasts.
Is there a trade-off? Is there any increased risk, for example, mid-air collision potential, or is there any hidden dangers as well?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is managing the airspace and also communications, just like anything else. So when we're up there flying different types of planes in different areas, I think it's important to just broadcast where you're working through NOTAMs, keep the communications up. We've been doing a great job with the FAA putting together an Arctic communication plan. So if we do have unmanned systems out there flying with manned systems, we're in different airspace and we're going to avoid collision.
You know, we've got just a little bit of time left, but can you talk about, I think you just mentioned it, and I think Fairweather was involved in, there's a daily briefing or a deconfliction process that's already in place?
That's right. The Fairweather guys up in the North Slope, aviation experts, and doing a great job coordinating our efforts. There's a number of oil and gas companies. There's a lot of government agencies flying up there. And we're doing surveys for marine mammals to do science out in the marginal ice zone and also hazardous weather work. And we've been having morning calls. Everybody checks in, even from our research vessels, and we let everybody know who's flying, where, and what times, so that we have proper airspace separation.
Well, that's really reassuring. JC, we're going to run out of time. I'm always afraid of this, but talk a little bit about you guys work with everything from global hawks, which are 737 size, down to micros, don't you?
That's right. And just quick on the global hawk, this week we're flying over hurricanes in the Atlantic. The NASA NOAA team share 5 global hawks. 2 are operational, and we're currently deployed out of Virginia flying over hurricanes and help us with our hurricane prediction. But up here we've been flying Scan Eagles, we've been flying the Aero Environment Puma. We just finished a month-long deployment out in the icebreaker Healy, and we were studying the marginal ice zone, and we did oil spill drills up there too. So we're really pressing the technology, and we're flying where other things aren't fit to fly, and bringing back the data from that.
Well, thanks for what you do, and I appreciate you being on the program again.
Thanks, Eric.
I look forward next time you're in Anchorage and get you back on the program.
You bet.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Until next week, fly safe.
Time for an update on your sea ice, and out across the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi Sea, we've seen the winds shifting direction now and coming into more of a northwesterly flow. That's allowed a lot of the ice to shift around, and some of it, in fact, to become shore fast, especially east of Barrow. There is some areas of open water here that has ice floating around in it, of course, so it's not completely covered up and solid just yet, but it seems to be moving that way fairly quickly. Around the Chukchi Seacoast, ice is advancing southward, and of course you have more ice developing inside of Kotzebue and Norton Sounds. Anytime you want to check the ice conditions, which are updated daily now, as well as high-resolution satellite imagery and sea surface temperatures, you can do that fairly easily by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, and our Sea Ice Desk program there is able to analyze this each day with updates there. And again, with high-resolution imagery that adds more to that weather story there. So be sure and check that out lately if you haven't, and you can download the information to make your own maps for your own needs. Northerly winds continue across the North and South Lynn Canal into Petersburg, into the Petersburg area and Stevens Passage, I should say, and 25 to 40 knot winds. They're much stronger in the north, of course, with 5 to 8 foot seas across some of the inner waterways, slowing down considerably when you reach into Clarence Strait with only 3 foot seas expected there. Offshore winds are running up and down the coast, more of a northeasterly flow all the way from Yakutat to 25 knots outside the northern entrances, 20 knots outside of Craig and the Dixon entrance there. Look for a 12-foot sea as you approach some of the southern areas. By Wednesday, though, the winds completely shift direction as that low pressure system is working northward and kind of merging with the western system. So we get more of a southeast flow running up the coastline, 20 to 25 knots, with 7 to 9 foot seas expected in the north, with 10 to 12 foot seas expected in the south. Northerlies continue inside most of the inner waterways, but they diminish greatly to about 15 to 20 knots, and southeasterlies pick up in the Clarence Strait to 25 knots with a 3-foot sea. South central wind should be pretty light in Prince William Sound and even variable outside of the Sound in the northern Gulf. We have an east and southeasterly flow coming into the Barrens and the Resurrection Bay area. Northerly flow coming down Cook Inlet at 15 to 25 knots, and east and southeasterly winds coming over Kodiak Island between 25 and 30 knots with 7 to 10 foot seas there. By Wednesday, though, most areas are also experiencing that shift in wind direction thanks to the merging low pressure system across the Gulf. Northeasterlies cutting across the Kenai Peninsula and around Prince William Sound, around 15 to as high as 20, even 30 knots there outside of Prince William Sound. 9-foot seas in the northern Gulf, 7-foot seas east of Kodiak Island, 6-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and 2 to 5-foot seas coming down Cook Inlet west of the Barrens. You're looking at a northeasterly flow with 20 knots in a 6-foot sea. Light easterlies will continue in Bristol Bay tomorrow, but for other places, northwesterlies will be picking up steam. 12 to 14-foot seas in the Pacific with 20 to 40 knot winds sustained with a considerably higher gust possible there, especially southwest of Kodiak Island. By Wednesday, you can see winds are up to 35 to 40 knots. Still watching for higher gusts with 11 to 14-foot seas. And inside Bristol Bay, the winds turn to the north and west with a 7-foot sea there, 15-foot seas north of Cold Bay on the Bering Sea coast for Wednesday. Across the Aleutians now, storm force winds north of Nikolsky and Unalaska. South of that, we're also looking for stronger flow across the Pacific with 15 to 18 foot seas, 40 to 45 knot winds there. 35 knot winds around the central chain and across the western islands. 9 foot seas on a 30 knot southerly flow. Now as we get into Wednesday, all areas should see diminished winds. It looks like a southwest to southerly flow for Nikolsky west toward the central chain. 25 to 30 knot winds in the west, and looking at easterlies developing for Unalaska and Nikolsky on the north and south sides as we go through the day on Wednesday. Across the west coast, storm force winds there for the St. Paul and St. George areas, 16 to 22 foot seas there, and that is for the inner waters there. Northerly flow around St. Lawrence Island through Nunivak Island at 30 knots with a 10 to 12 foot sea, and northerlies also cutting through the St. Matthew Island waters, 45 knots with a 20 foot sea expected there. Now Wednesday, big improvements are expected with a north and easterly flow coming through the Bering Strait and making it into St. Lawrence Island. Around St. Matthew, easterlies at 30 knots, northerlies back in the Pribilofs with a 9 foot sea, and north and northwesterly winds coming down the Yukon-Kuskokwim coastline at 25 to 30 knots. Across the north slope, looks like light flow coming in from the south and west from Point Lay to Barrow. South and westerly flow north of Prudhoe Bay. Still watching for some freezing spray though when in the open waters, seas only 2 to 3 feet. Northwest and northerly flow coming into the Kotzebue Sound area and Chukchi seacoast with a 5 foot sea. Still looking at light winds there as we head into Wednesday, 15 to 20 knots, more of a westerly flow around Barrow with ice expected to hold fast. Wainwright to the west, look for a 20 knot wind, and west and northwesterlies coming across the Beaufort seacoast at 15 knots with seas between 3 and 5 feet. Recapping tonight's weather, a winter storm warning is posted for the Noatak and Kobuk valleys. In the lower areas, you might end up with more than a foot of snow. In the upper Kobuk and Noatak areas, expect storm totals from 5 to 9 inches. And a snow advisory is posted for the upper Kuskokwim area with 4 to 7 inches of snow there around McGrath. Low pressure south and west of Kodiak will continue working its way northward. Storm area of low pressure working its way up the southeast coast, spreading wind and rain there, and a new storm forming out in the western Bering. We'll see that cross through the ocean as we head through Wednesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.